The rain didn't just fall that night, it attacked. Thick, relentless sheets slammed against the fogged windows of Midnight Brew, turning the little cafe into an island surrounded by a gray, roaring sea. Inside, the air smelled of burnt beans, wet wool, and the faint sweetness of someone's forgotten cinnamon roll. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting sickly yellow pools across chipped formica tables. I sat in the back corner booth, same one I'd claimed every Thursday for the last 18 months, nursing black coffee that had gone cold 30 minutes ago. My sketchbook lay open but untouched. The half-finished elevation of a boutique hotel stared back at me accusingly, another deadline I was going to miss because my brain refused to cooperate. 5 years after Sarah walked out with half the furniture and all the optimism, I'd perfected the routine. Work late, walk here, sit until they started stacking chairs, walk home to an apartment that still smelled faintly of her lavender candle even though I'd thrown it away years earlier. I was 34 going on invisible. Then the door exploded inward. A woman stumbled through, propelled by wind and desperation. Her navy coat was soaked dark, hood fallen back, black hair plastered across her forehead like ink strokes. She was breathing hard, chest rising and falling as though she'd run the entire 6 blocks from wherever she'd come from. Every head in the cafe turned. She didn't wait for attention. "I need a husband by tomorrow," she announced, voice cracking on the last word. The silence that followed was perfect, stunned, almost reverent. A teenage barista froze with a rag in his hand. The elderly couple near the window exchanged glances. The man in the corner pretending to read philosophy lowered his book an inch. She scanned the room wildly, cheeks burning, clearly regretting every syllable she'd just uttered. I don't know what made me speak. Maybe it was the way her hands shook. Maybe it was the way she looked like someone who had already lost too many things. Maybe I was just tired of being the only person in the room with nothing left to lose. "Then you'll have to come and live at my place," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Her head whipped toward me so fast I thought she might have given herself whiplash. For 3 long heartbeats we stared at each other across 12 feet of worn linoleum and half a dozen stunned strangers. Then the door banged open again. A tall man in a charcoal overcoat stepped inside, rain streaming off expensive wool. His face was handsome in the way expensive watches are handsome, cold, precise, and probably capable of cutting you. He didn't look around. His eyes found her immediately. "Elena," he said. The name came out like a warning shot. "This is ridiculous. Come home." She flinched, small, involuntary, but unmistakable. That was the first cliffhanger hanging in the damp air between us, a woman who had just begged for a miracle, a stranger who had offered one without thinking, and an ex who looked ready to burn the building down rather than let it happen. Her name was Elena Ramirez. 29 years old. Only child of parents killed in a head-on collision when she was 10. Raised by her maternal grandmother, Clara, on a 300-acre farm 200 miles north of the city. Clara had died 18 months earlier after a long, quiet battle with pancreatic cancer. The will she left behind was equal parts love letter and ultimatum. To inherit the farm, the orchards, the wheat fields, the white clapboard house with the wraparound porch, the barn that still smelled of hay and motor oil. Elena had to be legally married by her 30th birthday. 48 hours from the moment she walked into Midnight Brew. If not, the entire estate would be liquidated and the proceeds donated to the Children's Oncology Wing at St. Mary's Hospital, Clara's final act of generosity to the world that had taken so much from her family. Victor had been the obvious solution. They'd been engaged for 22 months. He proposed on that same porch swing, under fairy lights Clara had strung every December since Elena was 12. At first he seemed perfect, ambitious young attorney, polite to Clara, good with numbers, good with plans. Then the cracks appeared. Jealous rages over nothing. Checking her phone when she was in the shower. telling her which friends were appropriate, explaining, in calm, reasonable tones, why she didn't really need to work at the bookstore anymore, why she should let him handle the farm finances, why moving to the city full-time would be better for both of them. When she finally left, 6 months before Clara's diagnosis, he didn't accept it. He believed she would crawl back. Especially now. Especially with 300 acres and a 7-figure valuation dangling like a prize. We talked until the barista started pointedly wiping tables around us. She told me about the farm in vivid, aching detail, the way the apple blossoms looked in April, like pink snow suspended in mid-air, the sound of the wind moving through the wheat at dusk, the smell of Clara's kitchen on pie-baking days, cinnamon, butter, brown sugar. She told me about the night she left Victor, how she packed one suitcase while he was at a deposition, how she drove through a thunderstorm with the windows down because she needed to feel something other than fear. She told me about Clara's last weeks, how she'd held Elena's hand and whispered, "Don't marry for the land, Mija. Marry for the life you want to build on it." I told her less. Divorce papers signed in a lawyer's office that smelled of lemon polish and regret. A wedding band I'd eventually dropped into the river because throwing it felt too theatrical. An apartment that still had empty spaces on the walls where pictures used to hang. She listened anyway. When the barista finally cleared his throat for the 3rd time, we stepped outside. The rain had eased to a sullen drizzle. Victor's black Audi idled at the curb across the street, headlights slicing through the mist. Elena's fingers found my sleeve, brief, desperate contact. "If you're really serious." I said I was. We walked fast. 12 blocks. Every time headlights swept past she flinched. My apartment building was old. Brick, 4 stories, elevator that groaned like it resented the effort. I unlocked the door. She hesitated on the threshold. The place looked worse under the hallway light, drafting table buried under rolls of trace, dishes in the sink, couch cushions permanently dented from too many nights of me falling asleep watching documentaries about bridges. "I have a guest room," I said. "It's mostly storage, but the bed's decent." She stepped inside. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she whispered. Neither could I. Morning arrived with pale, watery sunlight. We moved like people trying not to wake a sleeping monster. First her studio apartment, a 3rd-floor walk-up above a laundromat. Tiny. Neat. Heartbreakingly sparse. 1 bookshelf. 1 plant struggling toward the window. 1 framed photo of her and Clara on the porch swing, both wearing identical sun hats, both laughing. She packed 2 suitcases, a cardboard box of keepsakes, Clara's blue enamel teapot wrapped in 3 layers of bubble wrap. At the courthouse we barely spoke. The clerk looked at our damp hair and tired eyes and sighed the sigh of someone who has seen every possible variation of human desperation. The judge was older, white-haired, gentle-voiced. He asked the questions. We answered. Gold bands from a pawn shop 2 blocks away, simple, slightly scratched, surprisingly heavy. When he said, "husband and wife," Elena's hand tightened in mine. Outside, the sun was trying harder. We stood on the courthouse steps for a long minute, blinking at the light. Then she started crying. Not loud. Quiet, relieved, terrified tears. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't think we'd actually get here." I handed her a tissue from my pocket. Neither did I. Back at the apartment she hung 1 dress in my closet, set Clara's photo on the windowsill, placed the teapot on the kitchen counter like an altar. Then she sat down on the couch and put her face in her hands. I made tea. We drank it in silence. That night, just after 11, something slid under the door. A thick envelope. Legal letterhead. Victor's firm. Petition to annul. Allegations, fraud, coercion, lack of genuine marital intent. We read it sitting on the living room floor, backs against the couch, the single lamp throwing long shadows. "He's going to drag this out," she said. Then we drag it right back. The next 6 weeks were a strange, fragile, beautiful experiment. We learned each other in fragments. She hated coffee rings on the table. I hated when she reorganized my spice rack by alphabetical order. She taught me how to make Clara's cinnamon rolls, sticky, gooey, dangerously addictive. I taught her how to read floor plans, how negative space could be more important than walls. We grocery shopped like we'd done it for years, arguing over whether fresh cilantro was worth $2.99, whether store-brand vanilla was a crime. We walked the river path at dusk, city lights coming on one by one. She told me she was terrified she would never be enough, not for the farm, not for Clara's memory, not for anyone. I told her I was terrified of letting anyone close again because the last time it ended with a moving truck and a note that said, "I can't keep waiting for you to show up." One night, after too much red wine and too little sleep, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you regret saying yes?" I looked at her, hair loose, cheeks flushed from the wine, eyes searching mine, and answered the only way I could. No. Not even for 1 second. Victor didn't vanish. He escalated. He appeared at the bookstore where she worked, standing between historical fiction and romance until the manager threatened to call the police. He sent flowers to my office, white lilies, funeral flowers, with a card that read, "She'll come to her senses." He filed motion after motion, each one more vicious than the last. But something was shifting. The performance stopped being a performance. When she laughed at my terrible attempt to salsa in the kitchen at 2 a.m., it felt real. When I came home exhausted from a 14-hour day and found chicken soup on the stove, nothing fancy, just broth and noodles and love, it felt real. When she fell asleep against my shoulder during a documentary about the Golden Gate Bridge, breathing soft and trusting, it felt more real than anything I'd known since I was 22 and still believed in forever. Then came the farm weekend. We left the city on a Friday afternoon in late October. Windows down. Radio loud. The smell of wood smoke and dying leaves rushing in. The farmhouse appeared at the end of a gravel lane like a memory made solid, white clapboard, green shutters, porch swing moving gently in the breeze even though no one was sitting on it. Inside smelled of old wood, cedar, apples left too long in the pantry. Elena walked through the rooms like she was greeting family members she hadn't seen in years. She showed me her childhood bedroom. Faded horse posters, shelf of dog-eared Nancy Drews, a tiny desk still scarred from years of homework. She showed me the attic where Clara kept her journals. That night we found the one that mattered. Leather cover cracked with age. Pages soft as whispers. Clara had written about love the way only someone who'd lived 82 years could. "Love isn't fireworks," she wrote in careful, slanted cursive. "It's showing up when the roof leaks. It's staying when the money runs out. It's choosing someone even when it's inconvenient. Especially then." Elena read the passage aloud, voice breaking twice. We sat on the porch after, wrapped in the same wool blanket, watching the first stars appear above the orchard. "I think she'd like you," Elena whispered. "I hope so." Victor arrived the next morning. No knock. He simply opened the door and walked in like he owned the deed. Words were exchanged, sharp, ugly, escalating. Then he grabbed her wrist. Hard. I didn't think. I moved. The fight lasted maybe 90 seconds. It felt longer. He left with a split lip, a black eye, and a promise that he would destroy us both. Elena cleaned the cut above my eyebrow in the kitchen, hands trembling. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. But I would do it again. 1,000 times." The final hearing was scheduled for the first week of November. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish, old paper, and nervous sweat. Victor's lawyer wore a $3,000 suit and a smirk. Our lawyer, Ms. Delgado, 5'2" and terrifying, wore sensible shoes and a glare that could strip paint. They presented the email, Elena's half-joking message to her college roommate from 3 months earlier: "If I don't find a husband by December, I'm going to lose the farm. Any volunteers?" Face with tears of joy. The judge, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes and zero patience for theatrics, frowned. Then Elena asked to speak. She stood without notes. She talked about loneliness. About legacy. About how sometimes the universe sends help wearing an old gray hoodie and carrying too many pens in his pockets. She talked about me. Not as a convenient solution. As a man who saw her. As a man who stayed. I followed. I hadn't prepared anything. The words just came. I married her because she was desperate and I had nothing better to do with my life. I stayed because she makes terrible coffee and perfect cinnamon rolls. I stayed because she cries at old movies and laughs at my terrible jokes. I stayed because she makes the world feel possible again. I stayed because I love her. Silence. Absolute. Even Victor looked like someone had slapped him. The judge called a 30-minute recess. That night we walked the river path again. Streetlights glowed like fallen stars. I stopped under the big sycamore. "Elena," I said, "if tomorrow goes wrong, if we lose the farm, the money, everything, I need you to know something." She looked up, eyes shining in the half-light. "I'm not going anywhere. Marriage certificate or no marriage certificate. Farm or no farm. I'm yours. If you'll have me." She kissed me then, slow, certain, tasting like salt and hope and the future. The next morning the judge ruled. Inheritance granted. Victor walked out without looking back. We didn't celebrate with champagne. We drove straight back to the farm. We spent the day in the orchard picking late apples, laughing when the ladder tipped, planning where the new greenhouse would go. That evening we sat on the porch swing, same blanket around us both. Elena leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think Clara knew?" she asked. "Knew what?" "That I'd find someone who'd choose me. Not the land. Not the money. Me." I kissed her temple. I think she wrote that while hoping exactly this would happen. Years passed the way good years do. Quietly, steadily, sweetly. The farm came back to life. New trees. New fences. A small agritourism business, weekend pick-your-own, autumn hayrides, winter bonfires. We built a studio for me behind the barn, glass walls looking out over the orchards. Elena ran the farm with a quiet ferocity Clara would have been proud of. We added 2 more heartbeats to the house. A daughter named Sophia Clara, dark hair, green eyes, fearless on horseback. A son named Mateo. Curious, always carrying a sketchbook, always asking why. Every autumn we host the Harvest Festival. Every evening we sit on that porch swing. And sometimes, when the stars are bright and the air smells of apples and wood smoke, Elena takes my hand and whispers, "Thank you for answering the craziest question anyone ever asked in a cafe." I always give the same answer. Thank you for letting me say yes. Because sometimes the most reckless leap becomes the safest place to land. Sometimes the person you help becomes the person who heals you. And sometimes love doesn't arrive politely, with flowers and a timetable. It arrives breathless, soaked, terrified, shouting to a half-empty room. "I need a husband by tomorrow." And you, tired, lonely, skeptical, stupidly hopeful, you answer, "Then you'll have to come and live at my place." And somehow, against every odd, it becomes forever.